Living with chronic pain is something that I don't think a healthy person can really fully comprehend. It's very hard to imagine, I think for most people, what it's like to wake up every day and just have severe pain that doesn't go away. The best way I can explain it is imagine, I think most people have had this experience where you have like a really bad itch, but for whatever reason you can't scratch it. So you just have this really obnoxious thing that's distracting you, that's in the forefront of your mind, and all you want to do is make it go away, but you can't. But instead of an itch, imagine having the worst pain you've ever had and multiply that pain by 10, and imagine having that for days on end. For me, everybody's chronic pain is different. For me, what I experience on a daily basis is chronic lower back pain, where I feel like my spine is bruised. It feels like this deep aching sensation that no amount of medication, no amount of physical therapy, of rest, alternative therapies, anything will ever make that go away. On really bad days, it's a lot more than that. I'll get muscle spasms in my back. I'll feel like all of my muscles hurt, like I've just been working out, even if I haven't. And for me, the worst pain that I've ever experienced was waking up from surgery. I had a failed spinal fusion that caused nerve damage in my leg. And when you initially wake up from surgery, you still feel the effects of anesthesia, so you're conscious, but everything feels kind of numb. You don't notice the pain right away. And it's only slowly the anesthesia wears off, and very gradually after my surgery, I noticed an odd sensation in my left foot. I felt kind of like my foot was numb, and then that numbness sort of turned into a burning sensation. And while I was aware at the time that that could mean I had nerve damage, probably because of the anesthesia, I really didn't make the connection of the severity of the situation. And unfortunately for me, as like a standard procedure after surgery, they put you on morphine. That's the most common, pain controller that they'll use. Now, there are different types of opioid receptors in the brain, and apparently I don't have the correct receptors for morphine to be effective. So as the anesthesia wore off, I was essentially unmedicated, and it got to the point where it was my left leg. It felt like my leg was being torn off, like I was having an electric bolt just constantly going down my leg, like I was being stabbed and set on fire at the same time. And I remember just wanting to scream and cry. But at this point it was like 9 p.m. and I had a roommate in the hospital who was an old woman who was asleep. So I refrained from screaming as loud as possible, even though that's what I wanted to do. And eventually I got the nurse to switch the painkillers and give me Dilaudid, because for whatever reason that's the only thing that works for me. And even with really high doses of the Dilaudid, the pain just wouldn't go away. And while I was in the hospital, they want you to start actually standing up and walking soon after surgery to prevent blood clots, because you can die from a blood clot. And I think it was 2 or 3 days after the surgery, they had a physical therapist come into my room and try to help me stand up. And I remember just, even with all the pain medication, not being able to put any pressure on my foot. It was just so excruciating that I felt like I was going to collapse. And at that point, I was starting to think that I'd never be able to walk again. Over time, nerves can regenerate to an extent, and it took about a year for the nerve pain to subside and get to a stable point. I still have the nerve pain, but it kind of comes and goes, depending on whether I'm having a good day or a bad day. If I sit down too long, I'll get nerve pain. If I lift something too heavy, I'll get nerve pain. And it's like a burning and stabbing. It kind of reminds me of the sensation of being tattooed, except for like a whole day. So it's very distracting, and it's one of those things that you just can't ignore. Even like day after day, you'd think you get used to it, and you do to an extent, but it's very physically draining. I don't sleep well because I usually wake up around 5 a.m. with just pain somewhere in my body. It makes simple daily activities like cooking incredibly hard for me. I have a hard time standing at my stove long enough to cook an actual meal. And I do have a back brace that I'll wear when I need to, which helps me stand up for longer. But I'm not really supposed to wear it for more than an hour or two a day, because if you rely on a brace too much, it weakens your core muscles and can actually cause more pain in the long run. So every day I end up spending a good portion of my day just managing the pain and keeping it at a level where I can function, where I can get some work done, where I can sleep at least 6 hours a night. That's a good night for me. So it's something that's with you all the time. And it's something that, like I said, you never get used to, but you learn how to live with it. It's like having an obnoxious roommate that you can't do anything about, and you just have to deal with it. And it took me a long time to accept that this is never going away. that this is going to be a part of my life forever, and that realistically as I get older, my spine will degrade more and it'll get worse and worse. And I've accepted the fact that sorry, I can't really talk about this. I've accepted the fact that I'll probably at some point need to be in a wheelchair and could end up paralyzed or just have such a limited ability to stand and be mobile. Because on top of everything else, I also have rheumatoid arthritis and other autoimmune problems. So I know I'm never going to have a normal life. And it's funny because I rarely ever cry from the pain. I don't know why, I just don't. It's just, you get to the point where you just don't respond that way. So I can't remember the last time I've cried from pain. But it's still hard for me to think about the things that I've lost. I think the hardest thing for me was leaving my job. Because I loved the work I was doing. I had a very promising career. I just had my work published, and like a month after my first publication, I got to the point where I realized I couldn't do the work anymore. And it wasn't just I couldn't deal with the pain from working anymore, it was I realized it wasn't fair to my coworkers. I wasn't doing a good job because I couldn't. I was doing about half the work that I used to do because it would just take me so long to do anything. And I got to the point where I was crying at work every day from the pain. Because working full-time at a job where I had to be standing a lot just wasn't possible for me anymore. So even though it's been, God, how long has it been? It's been almost 2 years since I left my job, and it's still just something that I don't like to think about. And I think that's one of the hardest things about having a chronic illness, having chronic pain. It's not even so much the pain or the illness itself. It's the things that you lose because of it. And that's what I think a lot of people don't understand. And it's hard to, it's hard to explain to friends why, no, I can't go to the movies with you. Because if I sit down through a movie for 2 hours, I'm going to be in so much pain and have so many back spasms that I'm not going to be able to move for the next 3 days. So it significantly limits your ability to have a social life. And there's always just people who just don't understand, think you're exaggerating, and will just kind of get sick of dealing with you. Nobody wants to be around somebody who's unhappy all the time. And I'm not saying that I'm unhappy. I'm actually very grateful for the things that I have in my life. But it's still very hard to be around people when I'm in a lot of pain, I'm able to hide it pretty well for the most part, but it gets to a point where if it's too intense, I just can't hide it anymore. So that's basically the main points that I wanted to make. And I'm hoping that by sharing this, it gives other people an idea of what it's like to live with chronic pain. There's over 100 million people in the United States alone living with chronic pain, and most of them feel isolated. They feel like nobody understands them. They feel like nobody cares. It's hard to be taken seriously when you look like you're healthy. You know, because I'm not in a wheelchair, because I don't walk with a cane, people assume that I'm fine. So if I say, oh, I can't do something because it'll cause me pain, people just think I'm being weak, or I'm just complaining, or I'm making up some excuse to not hang out with them. So it's very frustrating, and it's something that people living with pain don't want sympathy. We don't want to hear, oh, that's so sad, oh, that's so horrible, so awful. I don't think my life is horrible or awful. None of us want sympathy. We don't want people to feel bad for us. We just want people to understand and to not make assumptions, to not be negative, and just be empathetic and be kind and not be impatient. And it's hard when you don't understand what somebody's going through. But I'm hoping by sharing this that more people will be able to understand what it's really like to be living with chronic pain.